Here on the ground, change happens fast. Problems feel frequent and urgent. It's loud and anxiety runs high. From a satellite view, the Earth looks the same as it did thousands of years ago. We've been here before. Let's learn from our past and shoot for a better future.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of A Satellite View. I'm Todd Mikkelson, your host, speaking at you from Sunday, May 18th, 2025 in the space and time continuum. Our daughter Eve is coming home in a couple hours from Rome. She's been gone since January. We're very much looking forward, all of us, Heidi, me, Tucker, the dog, very much, and Gma, who that's what we call my mom now. We're all very excited to have her here in just a couple hours. Of course, she's just going to probably need to go to bed because she's flew from Rome to Detroit and then like a 4-hour holdover, and so a long day for her. Anyway, I'm obviously very excited about that. Trying to get the show in before all of that excitement happens. What a week. Organizing it, I just have a long list and some other things to read, trying to bring you stuff that you may not know about. You've heard about a lot of the things, the Qatari airplane, things like that. But there are some things that we need to laugh at, definitely. Trump's performance, the things he was saying, is a comedy. It's turned into a comedy. The most genius comedy writer who has ever walked planet Earth could not write a skit half as funny making fun of Donald Trump as Donald Trump did in real life making fun of himself, not on purpose. I mean, it was amazing. I thought, should I play this? Because it's comedy. But it gets so long. He just goes on, and it was it's art. It's art at this point. He's like, we got to stop the war in Ukraine. They have these drones, and the drones hit the trees, and the trees explode. They burned it. It's like the most expensive timberman. The most expensive timberman. And the trees just fall, and you hide behind the tree, and the drone goes around, and it finds you, and shoots at the tree, and hits the tree, and our Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, not you, Sean, a different Sean. Sean Duffy is a world champion tree climber. He's a tree climber. He goes up and down the trees, and coming down faster than any human should be able to do. He could break your back, but he's a world champion tree climber. Sean Duffy, he's trying to fix the FAA, and because Biden did nothing. Biden did. He had Pete Buttigieg rode his bike into work every day, rides his bike. That's all he does. Pete Buttigieg, he's going to run for president. I don't see it. But he just rides his bike. And that's pretty close. If you go find the clip of him talking, any one of the clips, it's amazing. And it is funny. We need to laugh at it. We need to laugh at him. And he needs to feel us and hear us laughing at him. It does work. He tweeted, does anyone notice since I said hate Taylor Swift, she's no longer hot? And then he's tweeting about the very low talent, no talent, Bruce Springsteen. Yeah. The President of the United States, not your child in junior high, the President of the United States. And there's no deals being made. Anywhere, anything they say is a lie. But, they're trying to do it all as diversionary tactics and to bring the fever pitch higher on the chaos. And if we stop reacting to it, it's not going to change. What does it help us to react to the chaos? It doesn't. It's time to start only laughing at him, otherwise ignoring him, ignoring Marco Rubio, who, by the way, this morning said, we need to let people into the country who are trying to flee chaos and horribleness going on in their own countries. But he wasn't talking about people from Gaza or people from, any brown people. He wasn't talking about brown people, okay? He was talking about white people from South Africa. Trump says there's a genocide going on down there right now against white people, the white people. That's why nobody wants to write about it or talk about it. So he's spending our money to fly old, out-of-shape white people from South Africa into the United States. And I point out that they're old and out of shape because some people are saying, he's trying to form an army, an Aryan army, like what Hitler did. No, these people are not fit to fight. Anyway, I have no idea what the hell's going on with that, but I know there's no genocide going on against white people in South Africa. So, a little bit of good news. I'm going to read to you a little bit from Scott Dworkin. I encourage you to go out and find Scott Dworkin, Dworkin. I signed up to his Substack so that I get emails. It's free. You can upgrade to be a paid member and you get even more information. But I find the free version to provide me with a lot of good stuff that is hard to keep track of all this stuff. He talks about Walmart, of course, saying that we're probably going to need to raise our prices. And then Trump saying they should eat the tariff, telling private industry what to do. Now, you heard me mention last week something about the Trump administration making countries take Starlink or be heavily tariffed. And this is something I didn't realize until just this morning. Proof of the rampant corruption is potentially leaking out. Senate Dems have called for an investigation into whether the U.S. government is pitching Elon Musk's company, Starlink, in exchange for a better tariff rate. With Dems not in power, a probe won't happen yet, but it does put a big spotlight on it. So Dem Senators Elizabeth Warren, Mark Warner, and Jeanne Shaheen, oh my God, sent a letter to AG Pam Bondi, which read, quote, suggesting that a foreign government adopt Starlink in exchange for relief on tariffs appears to be a textbook case of corruption. Chris Murphy slammed the GOP hard for their inaction on so many of the Trump regime's criminal acts, saying, quote, I just don't know that our Republican colleagues will ever break. This is a cult. But also, Scott Dworkin points out that protesters gathered outside the GOP Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene's Georgia office. They were there to demand the release of college student, and I'm never going to get her name right, who was in ICE detention, who was mistakenly arrested in Dalton, Georgia. Police allege she made a wrong turn. Problem is they pulled over the wrong vehicle. So there's a bond hearing on Tuesday. Yeah, I mean, that's not good news. But here's good news. In a surprising 7-2 decision, the Supreme Court temporarily blocked the Trump regime from deporting a group of Venezuelan immigrants using the Alien Enemies Act. Basically saying you can't use the Alien Enemies Act. And more about Ukraine, a scathing letter from the ex-ambassador. The policy since the beginning of the Trump administration has been to put pressure on the victim, Ukraine. That's news that we need to keep spreading. The fact that Donald Trump is owned by Vladimir Putin and is working for Vladimir Putin. We need to keep the pressure on about that news. Democratic Senator Tammy Duckworth held a veterans-focused town hall in Crystal Lake, Illinois, claiming veterans told me that they're worried about their health care. We need to keep this news going. Folks were protesting in Nashville against ICE arrests and in support of immigrants. One activist said, quote, We just want to send the message that there are more of us than they realize. Here to stick up for our community. We talked last week about communities showing up against ICE, trying to stop an arrest going on. Here's another thing. This morning, Vice President under Trump in his first term, if you want to call it that, Mike Pence this morning says, quote, to have POTUS in Saudi Arabia questioning America's global war on terror and describing it as nation building and interventionalist, I thought was a disservice to generations of Americans who wore the uniform, particularly given that speech in Saudi Arabia where 15 of the 19 hijackers hailed from. Pointing things out. Stephen King writes, the DOJ is all in a kerfuffle over James Comey posting in Seychelles 8647. Made me think of the Book of Proverbs, where a quote says, the wicked flee when none pursueth. So the Seychelles story you may or may not have heard of. James Comey, the ex-FBI agent that was fired by Donald Trump, took a picture of some seashells that were in the form of spelling out the numbers 8647, meaning throw him out. Now, Trump and everybody's saying this is a threat to his life. Secret Service needs to arrest James Comey. Of course, the GOP loved to put up 8646 when Biden was president. But they're saying that using the term 86 means that, to kill him. And it's not. If you're a bartender, no, that just means to throw the drunk piece of shit out. Donald Trump may not be drunk, but he acts drunk and he's a piece of shit. That just means throw him out. Doesn't mean kill him. And I also want to remind you of a story I told here, I don't know, a long time ago, about where the term 86 comes from. And it's up in the air. There are a few different stories about how it originated. The story that I heard was that back during Prohibition, there was a bar in New York City that was on one street. And it had a secret back door at the back of the bar that went into the building that was on the next parallel street over. And the address of that building was 86. So they were on, the 8th block of whatever street they're on. So, that was 86 South 4th Street. And the bar was on, 80-something South 5th Street. So when the cops were going to come, somebody would call the bar and say, hey, the cops are coming. Usually it was another cop that called the bar and said, hey, the cops are coming. And then the bartender would yell, 86! And then everybody knew that that's what meant to go through the back door and into the 86 building behind it, and then escape through that building. That's the story I heard. And if it's not true, I'm going to just falsely believe it. I don't like to do that in real life. But on that particular story, that's what I'm going with. Another piece of good news, and I'm just kind of going down lists here, so I might just be sort of jumping around, but a judge halted Trump's administration $370 million cuts to Michigan public health with a preliminary injunction. That's good news. Apparently somewhere, there's a picture of a bear. I don't know if this is a true story either. I'm going to tell it anyway. A bear wanders into City Hall building in California. And then somebody writes, you can't put a bear on a state flag and then act surprised when it shows up for a town hall meeting. Yeah. We gotta keep it light, right? We gotta keep it light. I've got lists of things to go through. We're gonna just keep jumping around here because the week was so full of things. I am going to get to a couple of important things that did happen this week that you probably have not heard about. I think everybody needs to hear about it. So let's take a short break and come back, and I'll get into a little bit of news that may or may not surprise you. Here on A Satellite View, we'll be right back. And we're back on a satellite view. If you like the music you're hearing here, go to toddmikkelson.com, push the music button. Also, go to Instagram and follow me at Todd Mikkelson. And go to YouTube and put the search into YouTube, a Satellite View podcast. And you'll find our YouTube channel where we're putting these shows up in their entirety, and people seem to like the video. We're getting more views through video. But also thank you for listening to the podcast if you're in your car or whatever, if you're just listening to the audio. U.S. completely loses perfect credit rating for the first time in over a century. It's actually the first time ever Moody's has downgraded our credit rating. They started doing this in 1917. I'm sure Donald Trump's going to come out and say, we had the highest credit rating. It was too high. Biden did nothing to bring it down. I brought it down. It needed to come down. It was just too high. It was too high. It was higher than the likes of which anyone's ever seen. And I brought it down because Biden did nothing to bring it down. He would still be right. Another thing, I'm just going down my blue sky list here, putting things that I kind of liked. Somebody put up a meme. Did you know? But this is true. A lot of memes are BS, but this is true. Did you know Trump's ex-wife Ivana wasn't an American citizen until 1988? She gave birth to Don Jr. in 1977, Ivanka in 81, and Eric in 84. How about we cancel their birthright citizenship? Huh? Yeah, so anyway, going down. Bill, the big, beautiful bill. House GOP just failed to pass their big, ugly bill out of the budget committee. They're fighting over how many Americans to rip healthcare and food away from. That was written by Representative Catherine Clark. So you may have heard that the bill, the budget bill, is unable to get passed. It didn't even make it to the floor. It didn't even make it out of committee. So there's some good news. And I do want to point out, I mentioned Sean Murphy, Sean, what's his name? Doesn't matter. The Transportation Secretary, Sean Duffy, the world champion tree climber. And Trump says that Biden did nothing to help the FAA and airports. And Sean Duffy's trying to do something. Well, first of all, I want to point out, we didn't have all these problems until Trump became president this time, if you want to call it that he became president. So it's been pointed out that by Representative Greg Stanton, 1 year ago, Congress passed a bipartisan FAA reauthorization bill to add air traffic controllers, modernize technology, and replace systems that are unsafe and outdated. So the Biden administration was trying to do something. They actually got real stuff passed through Congress. Now, I'm going to stop myself here. Otherwise, I'm going to, run out the clock, and I'm not going to mention the most important things. Some things that you may not have heard that happened. First of all, the plane from Qatar, Pam Bondi, who is the Attorney General of the DOJ right now, she said, no, we looked at it, and it's legal for him to accept this bribe. Then everybody was reminded. She lobbied for Qatar, for the royal family. She was paid $115,000 a month, not a year, a month, to lobby for the royal family of Qatar in Washington, D.C. Okay? There's going to be a lot of trouble someday about that. I don't know when, because she would have to investigate herself in this case. That's the problem. The main criminal is now the head of the DOJ. So, not sure what's going to happen, but here's something even more important, because this is going to piss off the money people, the rich people. They don't like it when you have an advantage in the stock market that they don't have. Pam Bondi sold off $5 million worth of, I think, of Trump-related stocks right before he announced the tariffs. when it was at its highest mark and it was going to tank the next day, she sold it because he told her to. She knew that there would be a smart, because she knew what was coming. That's called insider trading. People go to prison for that in this country. Martha Stewart went to prison for that in this country because the rich people, when you start to piss off the rich people, you get yourself in trouble. So that's a huge thing that happened. Now, another huge thing that happened, you hear Trump talk about Mexican cartels. There's a Mexican cartel that the head of, and I'm not going to try to do all the names because there's just too many of them and I'm going to say them wrong. It doesn't matter what their names are. The head of a major drug cartel was arrested in Mexico and extradited to the United States in 2023. Biden was just holding him, incarcerating him. Donald Trump, although he calls cartels terrorists, negotiated. I thought the United States didn't negotiate with terrorists. Well, the Trump administration did. They made a deal that ended up bringing 17 family members of the head of this Mexican cartel, the El Capo, his family members into the United States. They came with $70,000 in cash amongst them. Some of them are actually part of the cartel. Dealing in drugs, firearms, we don't know exactly, I don't know. And you would think if it was some grand master deal, like, oh, we made a deal with him because he's going to help us prosecute other leaders of other cartels, then, the Trump administration would be bragging about that. We made a great deal. We're going to catch all the cartels. No, they're not saying that. They're trying to be as silent about it as possible. They're hoping you and I don't notice. That's why they're doing all this other stupidity. He called for a military tribunal for Obama today. I'm not even interested enough in that story to look up what Obama might have done to deserve military tribunals. I don't care. We need to start ignoring the chaos, ignoring the distractions, because that's all they are. Distractions from stories like this. It was confirmed by law enforcement in Mexico. So this isn't just like a conspiracy theory or something. This isn't just a fringe story. It was reported by NBC, ABC, CBS, major news, legacy news, whatever you want to call it, corporate news, mainstream media here in the United States. Long stories written by NBC, ABC, other outlets. Went all the way to Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum called on the Trump administration to provide more information on why the cartel family members entered the United States during a May 14th news conference and said the United States did not alert Mexican authorities ahead of time about the alleged deal. Here's an excerpt in English from what she said on May 14th. We don't have official or public information that says why this family entered. We must recall the issue of extradition again. And yes, indeed it is. There is a policy of the USA not to negotiate with terrorists. It was their decision to name some organized crime organizations like this cartel, the Sinaloa cartel, to list them as terrorists. So why are they making deals with them? Going back to what Claudia Sheinbaum said, so let them report if there's an agreement or if there isn't an agreement. They have to report it, and they have to explain this to the people of the United States as well. How it is that if they're reaching an agreement, how they're doing it. And they need to report this to Mexico as well. Right? Trump is letting cartel members into the United States. Why? He said that's what Biden did, and Biden never did that. Trump is doing it. So whatever the Trump administration blames Biden of doing, that's bad, they're doing it. The Trump administration is doing it. In the meantime, how many people died in Kentucky and Tennessee of storms just this last week? Trump administration does nothing. They cut FEMA. So FEMA's not there. Trump administration says nothing about it. Instead, they're saying, put a military tribunal on for Obama. So we got to start ignoring this BS that they're doing, the chaos that they're doing, these distractions that they're doing. We got to start ignoring them. I want to point out just a couple other things about some news items that you probably did hear about. The word I'm sorry. Yeah, I wrote down here the word groceries, an old term, an accurate term. But at groceries, it's a beautiful word. That was part of his rant that I forgot to include when he was in the Middle East. Why is he saying that kind of stuff? Yeah, okay. Anyway, what I meant to talk about here was the act of terror that happened in California against an IVF clinic, reproductive clinic. Somebody took some powerful explosives in a car, parked it outside the building, blew it up in an act of terrorism. And terrorism is supposed to kill as many innocent people as possible, and it's supposed to certainly ruin whatever you're standing against, in this case, the IVF clinic, the reproductive clinic. This act of terrorism was a complete failure in both regards. Some people were injured, but they were let out of the hospital within 24 hours. So minor injuries, nobody else killed. One person dead, but it was the terrorist himself. And in this case, in an IVF clinic, all of the embryos were undamaged. The laboratory was undamaged. So it also failed in ruining the purpose of the reproductive clinic. And I think, that's a sign of where we're going here. They've lost their potency. The darkness has left the earth. A few fingers are still holding on, but they're leaving. It's leaving. You heard about this plantation mansion in Louisiana burning down. It was not arson. They did an investigation, and it was an electrical issue. So something made the electricity make a spark that caught that place on fire. That place should not exist. I find it very symbolistic that white people admiring other rich white people's beautiful old mansion where they owned slaves needs to be something that this country is rid of. We don't need to admire the rich asshole slave owners in order to remember that period of our history. So yes, people are celebrating that place burned down. I'm one of them. I would have been against it if it was arson. I still think it should not be there, but I'm against arson. This wasn't arson. This was, I don't know, the cosmos. Very symbolistic. I just found that interesting, that story to be extremely, extremely interesting this week. Also, Trump got played by Emmanuel Macron and Keir Starmer and the German leader and Zelensky. They called him up at the beginning of the week and said, hey, Putin said, let's meet in Turkey and get a ceasefire going. Zelensky said, okay, I'll be there. And then Macron and Starmer and these other guys were saying, okay, if Putin does not show up, we are going to give Ukraine overwhelming force to win this war. They called Trump and said, don't you think that's a good idea? And Trump said, yeah, that sounds great to me. So they were able to announce Trump agreed along with us that we will give Ukraine overwhelming force to win the war against Russia if Putin does not show up to this meeting. Putting Trump over a barrel, putting Putin over a barrel. Putin did not show up at that meeting. So I'm hoping to hear the news that Ukraine is receiving overwhelming force. Now, of course, people are saying, oh, well, it doesn't really count because the president wasn't involved. The president really needs to talk. The president needs to talk to Putin. We don't have a president. Stop treating him like he's president of the United States. God. So supposedly a phone call tomorrow between Trump and Putin. If it happens, it's going to be just idiotic stupidity. So I'm hoping to hear the news that Macron and Starmer and those other guys have already begun the process of making sure that Ukraine gets what it needs to win this war. A lot of legal, more than 200 suits against the Trump administration Elon Musk has suits against him, and his financial issues are getting worse. He has disappeared. I haven't heard from him this week or last week, I think, really. So this week has just been so full. I barely scratched the surface. Republicans are getting super mad at Pam Bondi for not releasing the Epstein files. That's another thing. And again, the Republicans cannot get their budget bill passed. I don't see how they're ever going to get this budget bill passed. So just scratch the surface on all the things that happened this week. We need to laugh when it's funny and not feel strife when they're trying to distract us. They're losing their power because we're taking it away. If we ignore their chaos, we've taken their power away from them. If we ignore their distractions and keep our eye on the important stories like Pam Bondi needs to go to prison, Donald Trump needs to get 86th, as does the whole administration. If we keep our eye there and not on their distractions, we will have a great summer. I feel very optimistic. I feel like we have risen above the horribleness, the horror of this. I feel like all of us are feeling better about what's coming, although we have no idea what's coming, but we all feel like something is coming, and this just can't go on anymore. And I run into more and more people who are saying that. Something needs to stop this, and I feel like something is going to stop this. The whole world is on our side. The whole world is in this with us. Many other leaders of other countries have said that they have evidence that Elon Musk tried to use Starlink to mess with their elections. There are studies that have been done in the last 6 months here in the United States that prove the same thing happened here. Donald Trump did not win this election. I think that's going to be revealed sooner rather than later. I don't know how. I don't know when. I'm not trying to get your hopes up. If you've been listening to this show, I've said this for a while. We're going to look at this from the future back and say, wow, that actually got taken care of. This historic thing about somebody stealing a presidential election and then the United States deciding to have some sort of redo to set things right and get rid of that whole administration, corrupt administration, and put in the rightful winners of the election somehow, actually ended up going pretty quickly. We're still here in it. I heard somebody say this is the longest, shortest 6 months of my life. I think that's accurate. Thank you for being in this along with me. Thank you for listening to this show. I'm in this with you. I'll be here every week trying to make you feel a little better about things. But you're doing a better and better job on your own. Take care of yourself. Live your life. Have fun. Do the things you enjoy. Spend time with the people that you like and love. Stay together. Let's all stay together and help each other out. There's way more of us than there are of them. We're in the majority. We're taking our world back from the darkness. The darkness has left. It's our turn to take power. That's what we're working on. Keep the pressure on. Ignore the chaos. Ignore the distractions. Keep your eyes on the good things. Take care of yourself. Remember, the whole world, all the other the leaders of the world are in this with the United States. They're on our side, not Donald Trump's side. They know Donald Trump does not represent the United States people. They're on the people's side. They're in this with us. So, I'll be here every week, including speaking at you next week.
Been listening to A Satellite View with Todd Mikkelson. Go to toddmikkelson.com for links and more information.